This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Today we're making our own Fallout-inspired leather backpack. Stay tuned. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So, Season 2 of Fallout has started on Amazon, and I am obsessed. I love it so much. So when I noticed that the main character, Lucy, was wearing this little number right here, I had to make it. So that is what this episode is about. I'm gonna try to bring you step by step with me as we recreate kind of that bag. Now, our first order of operations, though, is to actually get a good look at that bag, which through that whole first episode was super hard to do. I literally went frame by frame, just like taking screenshots with my phone of the bag itself. And in doing so, I actually realized something super cool about that bag. Do you see the kind of front and bottom corners of this bag here? This shows me that that bag is actually wet formed, which is really cool and something we haven't done in that big of a scale yet on this show. So basically, the whole front, sides, and bottom of this thing is a single piece of leather that had been wet and formed around something to make that kind of hard shell. And then the rest of it, the back and flap, is just another one piece of leather. So it's basically just two pieces of leather that have been sewed together to make this bag. Really, really cool, and I'm super eager to give this a try. First thing we're gonna need to make, though, is what's called a buck, which is the actual form that you use to shape the leather around. To do this, I have these 2x6s that are cut to roughly 17 inches long, and these two smaller ones that are cut to about 9 inches long. Basically so that when it's added in with the width of the other ones, it comes out to be 12 inches wide. And this is where my bag is going to differ significantly from the one in the show, not in the way it's made, but really in its size. When you look at the one in the show, it's actually quite small. It's probably only like 3 or 4 inches deep, like coming off of the back. And honestly, I am a hoarder of things in the post-apocalypse. I need more room in my bag. That is a very, very small bag, especially for a man-sized person. I imagine this is more of a costume decision. The bag is not meant to be functional in the show, but just to kind of look apart, right? But damn it, I want my bag to be functional. So by using those 2x6s, that means the inside of my bag is going to be roughly 5.5 inches deep, which is pretty good. And the bag itself will be about 12 inches wide, and it's going to be around 16 inches tall, which actually are just standard dimensions for like a regular backpack that you would use out in the world. Now, because I do want to round off at least the bottom corner, I didn't want to send screws or nails directly into it because then they would get in my way. So I actually made these little blocks here that are just going to help keep everything together. Basically, I use the width of the wood to kind of make my mark for where those blocks should go, line those up with my line, and lock it in with some screws. Then I can butt the next board up to that block and use some screws to lock that in as well. I just continue this all the way around to make a box. Doing this simply brings my connection points a couple of inches back so they don't get in the way when I'm trying to cut some corners. Now, if I was to leave it open like this, the leather itself would start to dip into there and you'd actually see like the shape of the boards through the leather. I don't want that, so I actually cut this piece of plywood right here, which is just an 1/8 inch piece of luan that fits directly over that box, and I nailed it into place. This will not only add a little bit of extra structure to my buck, but it'll also make it so you can't see the shape of the boards underneath it. Now, because the leather I'm using is around 8 or 9 ounces, I'm not worried about those corners being super perfectly rounded. The thickness of that leather will kind of make up for any slop in there. So I just simply used this Japanese saw and nipped off the edge on both sides down at the bottom, and then sanded them smooth. I also sanded the rest of the corners to kind of round them off a little bit, resulting in this nice smooth transition between everything without any really harsh, sharp corners. And basically just making a box. All right, so there are 2 more parts to this buck assembly here. One is going to be a base that box sits on, so it gives us some nice clean kind of transition to where the sewing rim of the bag will be. And another one is a piece that has a cutout that will fit right over our buck that's going to help us push that leather down. These I just made exactly the same size, so they'd be easy to clamp together and everything. Then I traced out that box and what's going to be my top one, using a piece of that 9-ounce leather that I'm going to be using for the bag as a spacer. Because remember, there's going to be leather wrapped around this thing, right? If we don't account for that, we're never going to fit that thing over the top. Once that's all marked out, I just used a big old drill bit to start a hole so I can get my jigsaw in there and cut that shape out. Then again, I made sure I sanded away any sharp corners just to help it not dig into the leather. And now I have this nice little assembly that perfectly fits over the top of that buck. Finally, I just screwed the buck onto my baseboard here, completing the entire assembly. Okay, now it's time to get into the actual leather of this thing. As I said, I'm going to be using this 8 to 9 ounce veg tan leather, which I soak by putting into this basin here and kind of just moving it from spot to spot until the entire place is soaked through. Whilst doing this though, I had a realization. If I was to take that wet leather and put it onto my buck, there's a real possibility of the wood in that buck expanding underneath it, which I don't want. I don't want to have to cut this thing free. So while the leather finished absorbing all the water and kind of, drying a little bit, I went ahead and just covered the entirety of the buck in some packing tape. This is just going to act as my water barrier and make sure I don't run into that swelling issue. With that good to go, I just went ahead and took my wet leather, shaping it around the buck, and then adding some nails to the top just to stop it from moving around. Now, because this is such a large piece of leather and there's a lot of area there, I can't actually just push this thing down straight. If you had some sort of a hydraulic press or a really, really heavy weight, maybe you could and get it to stretch perfectly around this. But I do not have any of those things. So the best I could do is to actually kind of fold the bottoms in here like a present, giving me the shape that I need without marring up my leather too much. Then I took the top of the form and started bringing it down, hammering it into place and making sure it was really tight. As it went to, I used bone folders and other things to really make sure that bottom was tight and adhering as closely as possible to the form. I had to make the concession to fold those in, but I wanted to be seen as little as possible, so I really want those tight. Finally, I added some clamps in place just to make sure it all stayed together and left it to dry. Then after about 5 hours or so, I removed that top section so that the spot underneath it had a chance to dry too. And check out how cool this thing is. It holds its shape perfectly. Not only that, but it's really strong. I could do push-ups on the damn thing. Which, when you think of it, is perfect for a post-apocalyptic bag, right? You have some sensitive goods in there, things you don't want to break. This has formed essentially a hard shell bag, which I think is really cool. Now to clean it up a little bit, I just kind of marked off where I needed the top cut so I could remove those nail holes and any of the kind of more wavy sections that the end would cause. Now that rigidity of the front is cool, but it did make me realize something that I hadn't thought of. The back of the bag will not be as rigid. It would do well as soon as you put weight in the bag, right? It's on your back, it's gonna kind of bow out over time. And I don't want that. I want it to maintain its shape. So in order to facilitate that, I actually just cut this piece of luan here, which is just 1/8 inch plywood, so it directly mirrors the inside shape of the front of the bag. By mounting this somehow, I actually hadn't figured out how yet in this process, but by mounting that to the back, that should make it maintain the shape and also stay perfectly square with the rest of the bag. Next, I just wanted to kind of clean up the rim of the bag. That's where our stitching is gonna go, where the back and the front will connect together. But it doesn't need to be as wide as I have it. I really only need it to be about 1/2 of an inch. So I just set my wing dividers to that and coasted it all along the side of the bag so that I'd have my measurement. Then I went back in with a razor knife and just cut away any of the excess. Then I cut what's gonna end up being my backing piece exactly to this width, and long enough so that I can wrap all the way around to the front and become my flap. I just kind of roughly marked where I wanted that to land with my nails so I can cut it to size afterwards. Then I used the shape of this bottle here to make my corners and cut those away with some scissors to make them nice and rounded off. Okay, and that's most of the pieces that I need to make the body of this bag, but before I start putting it together, I wanted to put the hardware into place so I didn't have to fight with the body of the bag to try to connect stuff together. So I just kind of measured out these little brackets here with D-rings on them, right about where I thought they should land, doing both the top and the bottom. Now you'll notice that the ones in the top are a little bit closer together and the ones in the bottom go all the way out to the edges of the bag. For that, I copied a backpack I have. I have this little Zelda-themed backpack here that I love, and that's how this is. But it makes perfect sense, right? When you're holding a bag, if it was all the way out to the ends, it's gonna constantly slip off your shoulders. Whereas if it comes pretty close on the inside of your neck, it's gonna rest comfortably on your shoulders, and there'll be enough space to come around your sides by having those off to the ends. Which just another fun thing about making stuff yourself is you can kind of understand the human element of why things are put together the way they are. I always find it fun when you learn something new that way. I just marked their holes with an awl and then punched said holes so I had a place to connect them. And of course, since I'm figuring out the holders of where they're going, I also went ahead and cut a bunch of straps. I'm gonna be honest, I took no measurements. There's just a random smattering of straps that I knew I could make work. Although I did make 2 of these here, which are gonna end up being the parts that actually go over your shoulders that help spread out the weight so that the straps aren't digging into your shoulder. They show up very prominently in the one in the show, and I really like the design, so I went with it. To make the spaces for the straps to go through, I actually just went ahead and used my hole punch to punch a hole 1 inch apart from each other, which is the width of my straps, and then used a ruler to connect the ends of those holes. Then I simply cut along my lines to kind of make this long oblong space. I repeated this to give me 2 on each side, spaced 1 inch apart from each other. This is just going to allow me to snake my strap through it, and again, really spread out that force so it's comfortable on my shoulders. This is also a really good way to make like a guitar strap, right? I think that has pretty much the same spacing there. Then I went through with my edge beveler and just kind of knocked all of the edges down to make sure they were nice and clean. Speaking of which, I'm going to be throwing out a lot of techniques and terms, and if you're completely new to leatherworking, they might be very new to you, so I have a playlist right here that'll go over some of those basics. Okay, with that, all of our parts are ready to be assembled, but I wanted to dye it beforehand. Now I'm going to be using a water-based dye, and to help make it even, I just sprayed down my pieces with some water first, and then applied my dye in a circular fashion, trying to keep it as even as possible. Then I went ahead and installed my hardware, just using some rapid rivets to lock everything in place. Now, through some context clues in the bag and the show, and kind of seeing little spaces between Lucy's back and the bag, I actually think their straps are hard sewn into the bag, but I don't like that. It gives you very little kind of adjustability. I like it being on the rings and you can kind of move it around a little bit more, and it'll naturally fall where it needs to fall depending on who's wearing the bag. That's just my justification for using hardware instead of sewing it. It's not because I'm lazy and hate to sew. It's not at all. I'm not gonna lie, I have really high hopes with the ease of wet forming and how easily this will come together, but honestly how incredibly functional I think this bag is gonna be. I'm super excited to see how it comes out. Speaking of easy to make but super functional, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is honestly one of the easiest ways to construct your own incredibly functional website. And I'm not just saying that, it's actually what we use to put our website together. We are crazy busy and not at all web developers, so having this tool at our disposal has made getting our business out there a lot easier. Especially because of the crazy amounts of templates Squarespace has to get you started. Not only that, but they have the new design intelligence tool, which is basically an AI to help you create the perfect website that you're looking for. Whether it's a site where you want to have a store to set up payments or to have a gallery of all your works, Squarespace makes the whole process fast, easy, painless. It's just been a pleasure to use. To get your website journey started today, just go to squarespace.com for your free trial. Then when you're ready to launch your masterpiece to the rest of the world, just go to squarespace.com/skilltree and get 10% off of your first website or domain. Okay, back to the build. Well, to riveting things into place though, I went ahead and added this strap to the bottom of the bag, not only locking it in with rivets, but locking those folds down with rivets as well. That strap at the bottom of the bag is just going to give us places to hang things, right? Since I have a couple of rivets in there, I now have basically 3 loops that I can use to hang stuff off of. Which is going to come in handy because, like the one on the show, I'd like to hang like a blanket off of the bottom of it, right? I think it looks cool, and honestly, it's functional. I think that's neat. Now, during all this, I still had no idea how I was going to incorporate that back support that I had cut. But to facilitate that, I just went ahead and cut this 2-ounce piece of leather that'll fit exactly in the space that'll be inside the bag. To temporarily lock it in place, I'm just using some of this Tanner's Bond tape that I add across all of the edges and then carefully lay my piece in place. After making sure that the board still actually fits in there, because it would suck to put this whole thing together and realize I did it too small, I went ahead and added some more Tanner's Bond tape around the edges and then actually added the front panel of my bag right onto that. This way, everything's gonna stay one cohesive piece while I go ahead and sew it together. Before sewing it though, I hit everything with this groove tool, which is gonna give me 1, a nice even line to work off of, but 2, it gives me a little groove for my stitching to sit into. This not only looks nice and clean, but it actually makes your stitching below the leather a little bit, which means it's gonna face a lot less wear and tear. Then I went through with my pricking fork just to make all of my stitching holes before setting this thing up and going through with a saddle stitch to stitch the entire thing. Again, if you want to know how to saddle stitch, just check out the basics of leatherworking kind of 101 stuff that I made. And though this took forever and I'm just not a fan of hand stitching, it is going to make a difference. Hand stitching and that saddle stitch specifically is super strong, and it makes it so that if any one stitch breaks, it won't really matter for the bag. It's still going to hold together because every stitch is like individually locked for itself. Anyways, now that everything was together, I went through with an emery board and just knocked down the edges a little bit to make sure they look nice and even. Because remember, at this point, we have 3 pieces of leather stacked together, so any little differences you're gonna see. But after that was all smoothed out, I just went back in with a little bit more dye to make it all look uniform. And look at this friggin' thing. This is a bag. Like, at this point, I have a little bag. It's really cool. And incredibly strong. Adding that little backing to it really makes all the difference in the world. Now, to help keep it protected from the elements and also just kind of like make the leather more supple, I went ahead and added this mixture of oil and wax to the whole thing, both inside and outside of it, which has become one of my new favorite things to use. Now, it doesn't do as good a job as like a mink oil or something in making the leather super duper supple. But what it does do is completely waterproof the thing. It's the same formulation one would use if you made like wooden salad bowls or something. It is food safe and completely watertight, which means basically if you really had to, you could fill this entire bag with water and bring it back to your camp. You might have a little issue with is maybe where the rivets are in place, but even them, they're so tight and I added some of that wax around them, this thing might actually hold water. It's kind of cool. As an aside, we made that mixture when we made the Middle Earth mugs, and when Maddie was putting them on, she put her hands on my porch. That was like 4 or 5 months ago at this point, and when it rains, you still see her handprints on the porch. The water just avoids those areas. It is both incredible and really creepy if you don't know what you're looking at. Like if you were house sitting my house and you woke up and there's just weird handprints, I could see you being weirded out by it. All right, to wrap this thing up, we need to go ahead and connect all of our straps to it. Starting with the top shoulder straps, I just kind of loop these over the rings and lock them into place with some rivets. These, just like the ones on the show, are going to be kind of like a belt strap. They'll have holes into it that feed into a buckle so you can adjust it. Now, I've gone over like putting together buckle straps in the past, but really quickly again, I just use the same exact trick that I use in those wider straps for your shoulders to make where the buckle keeper will actually go through. Then for this particular strap, I actually remove little half-round sections on either side where the buckle will go, which is really more just a style choice. Really, as long as you've made your strap small enough that it'll fit through your buckle, you shouldn't have to do this. Like, it doesn't add any extra freedom to it. But I've seen recently straps that were made this way, and I liked how they looked, so I decided to do it just to play with it. Anyway, with that, all you do is you feed the strap through the buckle, fish your keeper through that hole, and then wrap it around through the other side. Then after I lock it in place with some rivets, bam, buckle strap, which I went ahead and attached to those bottom rings of the bag. Now, if you want to know exactly how long I made those straps, I don't know. I did it all by feel. I kind of positioned the bag where it would go, and I held it up until the strap landed, like the buckle, landed right here on my rib, because I thought that looked cool and it was good enough. This is where it not only becomes more art than science, but I'm making a thing custom to me, because I'm actually going to use this bag. I like it, so yeah, I made it for myself. I invite you to do the same for your bag. Now for the belt holes in that top strap there, I actually just used my wing divider set to 1 inch and walked it up the middle of that belt, which will leave me these little dots behind to use as a guide. These I just went ahead and punched out with my hole puncher here, which will give me these perfectly spaced holes that I can use to adjust. Then slid on my shoulder protector, kind of completing that whole assembly. Sort of, because I forgot a dumb thing, guys. So that belt is long, right? And you usually need, like if you look on your own belt or whatever, you get another little piece of leather or sometimes it's metal that acts as a keeper. It's just gonna stop your strap from moving around. Normally, I like to make these first so they can be on the strap when you attach it, and then it's all one piece. Doing it after is not that big a deal. It's just, I don't know, order of operations thing. To make them though, all you do is you cut a little strip that can wrap all the way around your belt and overlap itself a bit. Then you simply scythe or shave down from the full width all the way down to nothing on either end of that keeper, one on the face side and the other on the flesh side. This way, when they wrap around and lap each other, they're not super thick, right? They're the same thickness as the rest of the leather. So it looks like one continuous piece rather than like a big, like chunky piece at the bottom. These I added some contact adhesive to on either side. And then once that was set up, I just wrapped around my little belt piece here, locking it into place. Now I just have a nice way to make sure my belt straps aren't just kind of flying all over the damn place. Now the final belt buckle assembly we need is actually to close the bag. So this I just made another little buckle assembly, lining the holes where it'll connect down with the bottom of the bag and marking it with an awl. Then I use said awl to punch my holes and actually use this kind of 2x6 here so I can place the bag on it and actually lock my rivets into place. And this is because I'm dumb. If I was smart, I would have put that piece in before I put the bag together. This is exactly what I was talking about with the back straps, of not having to like finagle with the bag being in my way. This top strap section, again, I actually saddle stitched into place because they show very prominently on the bag in the show. And honestly, it is a superior way to hold it. I will give it that. And look at this thing though. Look at how goddamn pretty that is. Oh my God, I love it so much. This is coming out so well. I'm very pleased with it. Though we are missing something that is very prominent in the show. If you look at the bag, it has all these rivets kind of in the front. Now, in going scene by scene on that first episode, when she's paying caps for the flea soup, which is awesome. But you can actually see the inside of the bag there, and these are just decorative rivets. They have no purpose at all. Not only that, but you can also see that the buckle in the front of her bag is not functional. It's not a functional buckle. There's actually a little snap underneath it, which is cool. I think that's neat. This is post-apocalyptic. Snaps existed, right? Like, if the world fell apart now, we have the technology for snaps, I suppose. So why not? But I generally hate putting hardware on when it doesn't have a purpose. I need purpose in a thing. So I decided to alter the design just a little bit here. First, I went ahead and measured out exactly where those should fall, again using my wing divider to make sure everything was nice and evenly spaced. Then punched all of those holes to accept my rivets. The difference is going to come with this 1/2 inch wide strip here. I start by bending it over on itself, forming this little loop, and then making a hole so rivets can be accepted there too. Then I temporarily put a rivet in place there so I could stretch it across all of the other holes and use an awl to mark out where those would land. Then after punching all those holes, I just kind of set all the rivets in place to make sure it's spaced out, and then looped it back over on itself, again using an awl to mark wherever the rivets would fall so I can punch a hole in it, and then using the base of just a random tool to give me a loop the size that I'd like, before marking those out and locking that in place too. And once secured, it leaves me with this kind of multi-loop system I could use for storage. By doing this for the top and bottom, it gives me a whole bunch of places that I can either kind of put tools inside of those loop sections or flat things in kind of the back section there. I can hang things off it like key rings or whatever. It just gives me a lot more functionality out of those rivets, I guess. I needed it to be functional. It would drive me crazy. Speaking of the rabbit hole of needed functionality, guys, I really went kind of crazy on this. But if you notice in this scene here, there are these two little straps hanging outside of the bag. What's that about? It's a hard shell bag. You don't use straps to like cinch it because it doesn't cinch. It's a hard shell, which means there's something inside of there that does need to be cinched, I feel. I mean, it could just be like hanging things like I did with my loops there, but I didn't see that when it was open. Anyways, I made up what it is. I decided a thing. Basically, I took this long strip of chrome tan leather here. It is the exact width of the inside of the bag, and it is long enough to go all the way down and around and have little flaps that kind of off to the side on the inside of the bag. Then I added this piece of 6-ounce leather that's exactly the size of the floor of the bag, which I sewed up on 3 sides. By sewing it up on 3 sides, I now have a little hidden pocket. So if somebody like goes in my bag and pulls stuff out, they're gonna see the floor of the bag, but obviously I have a place to hide stuff. Now on either end of that piece of leather, I just kind of folded it over and sewed it into place, which gives me this little channel that I can fish some cordage through. I think you see where I'm going with this now, right? Basically, we use this thing to line the inside of the bag so that once we add a bunch of random crap to our bag, we can close those flaps over it and then tie it off with our cordage. Now, if we're running around or whatever, things aren't going to be able to fall out of our bag randomly. And if it rains and any moisture gets in there, well, all of that's going to kind of go around the outside of the bag, which we know is waterproof, and protect the stuff inside. But if we overstuff our bag here, well, those 2 little flaps can wrap around the side of it, tie off, and now it's still protected and everything doesn't fall out of our bag. Not only that, but we can grab it all as one unit and pull everything out of our bag in one fell swoop. Which is great because I'm envisioning, since this is a hard shell bag, it's going to be hard to get to things that you need without taking everything else out. So my thought is to actually, like all the little vittles and stuff, we're going to make little separate bags for it eventually. Not this episode, it's long enough. But we'll make little separate bags for it that we can kind of like position inside. So they're easy, they're labeled, you can just kind of grab what you need. This is like my daily toiletry things out and whatever. And then the longer term stuff will go underneath, like clothing or whatever. But by doing this, you could actually pull it all out in one fell swoop, take things that you need from the bottom, shove it all back in the bag, right? That's convenient and cool. I think that worked out perfectly. As one last thing, just to kind of pull the whole look together, we're gonna use this little bottom strap here, which will fish some cordage through so that we can wrap it around our blanket and tie it into place. And look at this thing that I have created. Oh, I love it so much. Like, aside from it being obviously bigger than the one in the show because I wanted it to be useful and made for me, look at it. Look at how cool that is, right? It's got its little blanket on the bottom is awesome. This whole assembly works out good. Putting it on, it's a backpack. These things make a huge difference. The wider straps at the top here, like if you fish them down and just kind of have the leather on, you could feel where it would dig, but it is a genuinely comfortable backpack. I got it full of crap right now just to kind of test it out and see how it feels. It feels comfortable. The structure kind of in the back plate is awesome. Check that out. I am pleased as punch with this thing. I think it is fantastic. But I'd like to know what you think. What do you think of the process? What do you think of the wet forming especially? I thought that was a really neat process. I'd like to play with more on bags like this. It's really cool. Tell me how you'd have done it differently, or if there's maybe something else from the show you'd like me to make. I've kind of really been feeling post-APOC, like post-apocalyptic builds lately, so I really wouldn't mind doing some more. Let me know. Anyways, if you like what we did here today, consider giving me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you. You've made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we can't do any of this without them. It's only because of them we're able to afford the materials to make awesome bags like this or whatever else comes to mind. A giant thank you to our newest high-tier Patreon member, Daniel Cedello. Forgive me if I butchered your name. And of course, a massive thank you to our Grandmaster tier Patreon members, Froggy and Dragon Design. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps out a lot too. Now, if you excuse me, I must go to the wasteland to make more content, because YouTube never changes. Also, I'm out of tea, so, you know.